Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be covering persistent storage, which will allow us to save and load the items stored within our inventory after closing and reopening the app. First thing you're going to want to do is open up the inventory script, and once this is loaded up, we're going to scroll all the way up to the top, and the very first thing we're going to do is import a new library. So using system.io, and this will allow us to actually save files onto our computer. So we're going to come down here and we're going to create a new header for a new section here, and this is going to be called save/load. Then we're going to go ahead and create a private string, and we're going to call this our save file name and equal this to something like inventory save.json. And then after this, we're going to do a public list. Actually, our list should come above our string here so that our header actually shows up. And then we're going to just create a public list game object, and this is going to be called all item prefabs, and then equals new list game object, like so. This is going to store all of our prefabs of every item that we can have in our inventory, and this is going to allow us to instantiate these items back into existence after we've closed and reopened the program here, the game. So scrolling down a little bit, inside of our void start, we're going to go load inventory, like so. Obviously this function doesn't exist yet, so it won't come up with anything. It'll just be a red squiggly line. And beneath this, we're going to do a public void on application quit. This is a bad way to do it. That's how we're going to do it. We're just going to go save inventory. So this void here is called when the game is closed or quit. We will save the inventory, and inside of a void start, we are loading the inventory. So when we open the game, it will load it, and when we quit the game, it will save it. So then what we're going to do is scroll all the way down to the bottom, and we're going to create those two functions. So the first one is a private void save inventory. Beneath this, we're going to create a new private void load inventory, like so. And then you're going to want to scroll all the way down to the bottom outside of our current class, and we're going to create two system.serializable classes. So to do this, we go system.serializable in square brackets. We're going to go public class item data. Open this up. We're going to create a public string item name. We're going to create a public int quantity and a public int slot index. Then we're going to do public item data, string item name, int quantity, and int slot index. Open this up, and we're just doing this dot item name is equal to item name. This dot quantity is equal to quantity, and this dot slot index is equal to slot index. And finally, underneath this, we're going to do system.serializable again, and we're going to create a public class, call this inventory data, and a public list item data, which is the class we just created. We're creating a list of item datas, and we're going to just call this slot data is equal to new list item data, like so. So we're using this class to record every item. We're recording how much of that item we have and which slot that item is found in. So when we save it, we'll save the name, quantity, and slot index, and when we load it, we'll look at the slot index, find the item, or we'll look for the slot that this index is pointing to, find the item that the item name represents, and then assign that quantity. There's one more function actually that we need to create, and that will be a private void clear inventory. And what we're going to do is for each for each slot in all inventory slots, we're just going to do slot.setItem null. Now we're going to set up our save and load functions. So coming into our save inventory function, this is the shorter of the two. We're going to do inventory data, then we're going to call this data is equal to new inventory data, like so. Then we're going to do for each slot in all inventory slots. So we're looping through all of our slots. Item is equal to slot.getItem. We are getting the item in the current slot that we're looking at. Then we're just going to do if item doesn't equals null. So we did actually get an item to look at. We're going to do item data with a lowercase I is equal to new item data. And then we're just going to do item.name, item.quantity, current quantity, and then we're doing all inventory slots dot index of, and we're passing in slot. So essentially what this is doing is we are creating a object from our item data class, and we're filling that object with the item's name, quantity, and the index that the item can be found in. Finally, we're just going to do data dot slot data dot add item data, which is just the variable we just created, like so. Beneath our for each loop, we are then going to convert the data to a JSON format. So to do this, we're doing string JSON string, or we'll do JSON data is equal to JSON utility dot to JSON, and then we're passing in data. And beneath this, we're going to do file dot write all text, save file name, data, or rather JSON data. There you go. So that's it for our save inventory. Essentially what this is doing is we are looping through every slot in our inventory, seeing if that slot has an item, and if it does, we are creating an item data object from the class we just created and writing this to the file, and the file is going to have the name that we created for our save file name. Now we're going to do a quick load inventory. So we're going to do if file.exists and open this up, and we're just going to write save file name. What we're then going to do, or what this basically does, is checks to see if the file under the save file name that we created at the top actually does exist. Then we're going to do string JSON data is equal to file.read all text. So we're reading from that file, save file name. We're reading from the save file name's file to actually get the data out of it. We are then going to convert this JSON data back to a data object that we can actually understand. So then we're doing inventory data is equal to JSON utility dot from JSON. JSON utility. JSON utility dot from JSON inventory data, and then JSON data inside of some brackets there, just like this. So this is just converting the JSON data back to a readable format. We're then going to clear our inventory with that function that we just created to make sure there's nothing already taking space up in there. And then we're doing for each item data in data.slot data. So we're looping through all the item data objects within our list that we have just gotten. We're going to do game object item prefab is equal to all item prefabs, which is the list we created earlier, dot find, and then we're going to do prefab equals, and then a alligator to create essentially create like a sort of arrow. Prefab dot get component item dot name equals item data dot item name. Essentially what this is doing is we are looping through all of our items within our all items prefab list, and we're trying to find the one that has the name that matches the item data name from within our save file. We're then going to do if item prefab doesn't equals null, meaning that we actually did find an object. We're going to do game object created item is equal to instantiate item prefab drop location. So we'll just spawn it at our drop location dot position, and then quaternion dot identity. So essentially what we're doing here, we are converting our JSON file to a readable bit of data, clearing our inventory, and then we're looping through all the data that came from our save file and finding the objects and instantiating those like so. So beneath this, we are then going to do item equals created item dot get component item. We're then going to do item dot current quantity is equal to item data dot quantity, so the stored number of the stored amount of the object. And then finally we're going to do add item to inventory item, and then we're doing item data dot slot index. Now after we've done this, you'll notice that we get an error beneath this. We'll fix this in a moment, and what we're actually going to be doing is overriding the add item to inventory's functionality to directly set the index of the slot, which will allow us to put the items back into slots that they were originally in when we closed the game. But before this, we'll do for each slot in all inventory slots, and then we'll just do slot dot update data, just like so. This will just update all of the slots to make sure that they all have correct data stored in, as well as their quantity is updating. So to do this add item to inventory override thing that I mentioned, we're going to scroll up to that exact function. So mine's up here, add item to inventory. And we're just going to come in next to our item to add, and we're going to go int override index is equal to 0, or rather we'll do -1. So, sorry, misspelled that. Override index, perfect. So right at the top of our void here, we're going to do if override index doesn't equals -1. So if we have set something else within our override index, we'll do all inventory slots, and then we will directly access the one pointed to by our override index dot set item to add. So we are directly setting the slot found underneath this override index's pointer to the item that we've just instantiated from our save file. We are then going to do item to add dot set active, or rather dot game object dot set active false to hide that game object, because we're essentially skipping the rest of this function here. Then we'll just do update. We don't need to do that, rather we'll just do all inventory slots override index, and we will update this. Update data, we probably don't need to do that, but it's just worth doing anyway. And then finally we will return. And by returning, we're just breaking out this loop. So that's the override. You'll notice that the little squiggly error has now disappeared, and we can go back to our Unity scene and set the rest of this up. So back here on our Unity scene, when we now click on player, we can see saved and load, and we have this new list called all item prefabs. So similar thing to what we're doing with the item recipes, we're going to create a bunch of prefabs. So as you can see, I've made a new folder called prefabs, and I put my purple item that was a craftable item in there. We're going to select all of our items that exist in our game, and we're going to drag these out into our project files here to create prefabs from those. And we're going to drag these prefabs into this list. If we go ahead and load up the game here and open our inventory, you can see it's empty. If we pick up some items, there you go, and then we close the app and reopen, you can now see that the files have been saved, or the items have been saved, as well as their position. So if I collect all of these, I now have 2 of each. I can close and reopen this. And as you can see, their position in the inventory has been saved, as well as their quantity. And that's all. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to make a new episode this week, coming out on Friday.